My name is Dee Freeman, and I was born in Tallulah, Louisiana, the deep South. I am the fifth of 8 children. My parents were farmers. We lived on this huge farm that was over 100 acres. We had a lot of animals: pigs, cows, turkeys, horses, and goats. It was kind of a magical environment to grow up in. About 1.5 miles down a dirt road from me lived my mama's parents, my granddaddy Archie and my grandmama Elvi. My granddaddy was my best friend. I mean, we were together every single day. He was kind of my person. Granddaddy, this boy at school named Vincent James liked me. I know because he hit me in the shoulder 2 times, Granddaddy. He punched me 2 times. But I don't like him, Granddaddy, because he smelled like beef liver. That boy you say would like you. Don't let no man put his hands on you. If a man puts his hands on you, walk away, child. Just walk away, get out of there. Then go get your brothers to whoop his butt. And if your brothers ain't around, get your Aunt Bernice. She a pretty good ass whooper too. One night in December, my father came running into our bedroom, turned the lights on, and said, "Your grandparents' house is on fire." I jumped out of my bedroom window, took off running down to my grandparents' house, and it looked like Dante's Inferno. I mean, it was just insane, a lot of chaos going on. I ran around all night looking for my grandparents. I never found them. And it was the next morning when I found out that both of my grandparents were dead. A little bit shortly after that, they started an investigation. They arrested someone, and the person they arrested was my father. Now today, nobody really believes that my father did it. There are a lot of red herrings. One of them was the KKK. They perhaps thought they had something to do with it. My mother felt that we couldn't stay in Louisiana because of the circumstances, so she packed us all up, put us on a Greyhound bus, and 3 days later, we landed in California. Not the California you'd seen in postcards. This wasn't the beautiful palm trees and the bright lights. We landed in East LA. I managed to make it through junior high and high school, and I graduated high school. And I started working 2 jobs and trying to put my way through college. I told my mother that I was exhausted all the time, and she said, "Well, you better find a plan B." So I was sitting at a friend's house one day, and a commercial for the Marines came on. And they said, "We are looking for a few good men." And I made a joke to my friends that were sitting around. I said, "I wonder if they could use a few good women." And the response I got surprised me. They all burst into laughter. And they said, "Girl, I mean, please, do you honestly believe that you are worthy enough to be in the Marine Corps?" And I just sat there staring at them. And they said, "Girl, the Marines work out every day. I mean, like they go running all the time. And the only running you do is down to the mall and back. So we tell you what you should do. Run down to that church, find yourself a man. Forget about the Marines, because, girl, you ain't Marine Corps material." You know, I sat there and I didn't say nothing. I kind of laughed along with them. But inside, I was pissed off. So a few days later, I went down to the recruiting station, and I sat down and I talked to one of the recruiters. And 6 months after that, I entered the United States Marine Corps. And was it easy? Absolutely not. They tell you that there is only one service that's harder than the female Marines, and that's the male Marines. And somehow I made it through 2.5 months of the Marine Corps. And I look back now and I think, if I had to do it over again, would I do it again? Hell no. But the best thing that could have happened to me was going into the Marine Corps, because they teach you, you're going to get with the program or you're not going to survive. And it actually became a lot of fun for me. I ended up staying in 6.5 years. I was a sergeant when I graduated, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So in the meantime, I met this man named Hal. I was stationed in Japan. And he came running into the station one day. I was working at the TV station, and I thought, dang, he was cute. So we started talking, and we ended up becoming best friends. And about 1.5 years, 2 years later, we entered into a relationship. At this time, I'd been in the Marines about 5.5 years. At the 6.5-year point, I got out of the Marines. I married Hal. He was still in the Marine Corps, so they sent us back to Japan. That's where my daughter was born at. And while I was there, I decided I didn't want to work on base. So I talked to one of the engineers at my husband's radio station, and I ended up being hired. And I was the only non-American DJ at an all-Japanese radio station. And every now and then I'd be jamming along to the songs, and I'd tell my engineer, oh my God, that's the shit. And they'd say, no, I can't say that. You can't say shit because somebody out there gonna know that's a bad word. And then after we had been there for about 3.5 years, we decided it was time to come back to the States. I mean, I had been in Japan at that point for almost 6.5 years, and it was time for me to come back to the States. So shortly after that, I got pregnant with my son, Shane. We came to California and pretty much been here most of that time since then. I came back to California because I knew there was one profession that I had been fascinated with and obsessed with for decades, and that was the field of acting. I started looking around at some of the community theaters and doing a little stage show here and there, and from junior high school until I graduated high school, I was in a piece almost every year. And with the exception of one 3-year stint, I've been in the field ever since. I got my first break doing a TV show years ago that no one else will probably remember, called Coach, that starred Craig T. Nelson. I did a lot of TV shows. I did Party of Five, 6 Feet Under, The Shield, X-Files. I recurred on Third Rock from the Sun, did 2 or 3 episodes of Silk Stockings. I recurred on The Hughleys. Worked my way up through the field. Some of my stuff I thought was Emmy-worthy. Some was definitely not. However, I tried to take something from each piece.
We went through an extensive pageant screening and background check at Ms. Kensington Parker's lovely home.
Oh, this is great!
I've been to that woman's house of horrors. What? You think because we're actually Black, we wouldn't be invited?
Well, then since you have been there yourself, you are aware of the full process and understand that our daughter Annette has been deemed satisfactorily Black enough.
Nettie's favorite author is Maya Angelou. Her favorite TV show is Roots, and at Thanksgiving, she prefers dark meat over white meat.
Oh, Mrs. Champagne, there's no need to try to sell me. I can tell by your check and 2 forms of ID here that your daughter is more than qualified to be in my Black pageant.
I want to live here forever. Look what I found. It was under another bigger dead cat.
That's where he went.
Found it. Found a pet? Better. That earring I lost 2 weeks ago.
Moving on.
It's Prada.
I like to look inside the washer and dryer because snakes love the heat.
A snake could be hiding inside of the washer or dryer?
Yeah.
Congratulations. You're now in charge of doing the laundry. Forever.
So all of these years, I had been married to Hal, who I met in the military. And to be honest, we had an absolutely great relationship. But I felt that it was time for me to move on. And so we decided to get a divorce. And I also decided, I had been an actress all that time, but acting is feast or famine. You either got a job or you don't. And I didn't think I wanted to play Russian roulette with my career. So I decided to take a regular job, but all I knew how to do was act. And one of my friends, who was a flight attendant, said, Dee, I think you make a pretty good flight attendant. In fact, you can be an actress and a flight attendant. So without really looking into it, I said, you think so? I said, oh, okay. So I went out for 3 different airlines, and the third one, US Airways, said yes. So 3 months later, I entered training to be a flight attendant. I absolutely loved it. But it was, I realized after a while, a second to acting. So after 3.5 years, I finally decided to walk away from flight attending. But I have to say this about it. Some of my closest friends today are those pilots and flight attendants that I flew with. So, there's some people who say, wow, you took 3 years away from your career and went back there. But what I got in return was something that I don't ever want to lose. I got some of my best friends ever. So anyway, I came back to the field and I took a job at a hotel, working at night. I figured if I got my days free, I can work at night. If I get auditions, I can work on them at nighttime and go to my auditions during the daytime. And it worked out for a long, 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 long time. And then it came August, I want to say, of this year. I was at my mother's house and I noticed that I felt a tightness under my breast, like someone had put a belt under it and was just pulling it tighter and tighter. And there was a pain in my shoulder. So after about a week and a half, I went to the doctor. He gave me some anti-inflammatories to solve the problem. About a week and a half later, it hadn't solved it, so I went back into another doctor, told him the same thing, tightness under my breast, right shoulder bothering me, what's going on? So he gave me some other medicines. He said, this should clear it up, it shouldn't be a problem. 2 or so weeks later, I'm still having the same problem. And I go in to see yet another doctor, except this is a physician's assistant, and it's a woman. I tell her the same thing. Tightness under my breath, pain in my right shoulder. And she said for the first time, why don't we get a chest x-ray? I don't know why the other 2 doctors didn't say that, but she said, yeah, you said there's a tightness, so let's look in that area. And so I went and got a chest x-ray and I left. And I was shopping in TJ Maxx when I got the first call from an unknown number. And I ignored it because I'm shopping at TJ Maxx. There's nothing going to take me off of my game. 5 minutes later, here comes the same number. I had left TJ Maxx and went to Home Goods. And here comes this number again. And I pick up the phone and I go, hello? And she said, yes, this is. And she identified herself as the physician's assistant I had met with. And she said, they saw a mass on your chest x-ray. And it didn't dawn on me at that time exactly what that meant. I said, oh, okay, what I got to do? She said, you got to come back in. We want to give you some blood tests and take some other tests. So I said, okay, I went back in. We did some blood tests. We took some other tests. And over the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, I went from test to test. I did CT scans, MRI tests, but it was the PET scan, which was done 2 weeks ago, where they finally, even though we kind of, at that point, had a great idea of what we were contending with, they finally said the C word. They said, wow, we are pretty sure, even though we're going to have to do a biopsy, we're pretty sure that what you have is stage 4 lung cancer. And I sat and I said, stage 4, how could it have gotten to stage 4? And they said, well, unfortunately with lung cancer, you are asymptomatic. By the time you start getting symptoms, it is already metastasized, which is the case with me. So I have a mass in my right lung, my left lung, my ribs, my lymph nodes. And I said, so what does this mean exactly? I said, so is this something that, that you can do surgery with? And they said, no, you can't treat lung cancer that has metastasized. You cannot do surgery. That's only if it's in one little spot. Mine had spread to too many places, and I said, okay, I have a niece who is an emergency room physician, and I called her up. She had been, talking to a number of my doctors. She's probably the best thing that could have happened to me because she has taken the mystery out of what I had. And I told her, I said, these doctors keep saying words like concerning. What is this in this area here? All this lit up mass. Well, that's very concerning. Why don't you say the C word? Why don't you just come out and say, we see cancer? She said, until they get that biopsy back that absolutely defines and says that this actually is that, they're not going to say it. And so I said, well, do you have a time frame in mind? He said stage 4, and they wouldn't even given me that either. So they did the biopsy, and finally I heard the words that I felt like I didn't understand how this could happen. My niece mentioned to me one day, she said, why did you never get a chest x-ray? I had no idea I was entitled to one. It appears that if you smoked for close to 20 years, which I did, and you smoked close to a pack a day, which I did, you were entitled to a free chest x-ray. The first time I heard that was from my niece. Now you figure over 30 years, I've had anywhere from 50 to 75 doctors. Not one mentioned it. Not one. And I look and I say, should our medical profession not be about preventative measures? I've asked some of my other friends, were you aware of this? They were. They are also all white. So how did they get the memo and I didn't? I look at this and I think, I now have to spend the next year to 2 years fighting this disease. And I wouldn't wish what I have to go through on anyone. What I have a hard time understanding is how preventable this was. Why didn't one doctor mention to me that a chest x-ray, and even if they say you couldn't have seen it in a chest x-ray, maybe an MRI, but should our medical field not have looked and said, you know what, you smoked for a while, so let's give you a test just to make sure that you're okay? No one did. That's the problem that I have with all of this, is how preventable all of this is. But there's something about those of us who are in the Marine Corps. I know what my odds are, but I have no intention whatsoever, none, of giving in to whatever numbers they say I have. I get to determine that, no one else. I've been a fighter all of my life, and I figure this is just a pimple on my backside, something I have got to fight down. But I also know that the fight is not going to be easy. So one of the reasons that I am putting this on camera is I want to reach out to all my brothers and sisters out there. I don't care if you're white, black, Samoan, it makes me no difference. If you smoked anywhere from 10 to 20 years, if you lived in the house with somebody that smoked from 10 to 20 years, get a chest x-ray. Now, I had a friend who went down and asked for a chest x-ray because his wife smoked, and they said, well, she had to smoke for a certain amount of years. And I said, you know what? Develop a damn cough. Develop a cough. Because how much is it going to cost you to do a chest x-ray? $3,200 maybe? Versus the millions it's going to cost for us to fight this down? You know, at one time, I'm pretty sure a mammogram was every now and then. You get it this year or maybe that year. There had to have been an instance where something happened where they said, you know what? We better give out annual or semi-annual mammograms to women. What about the men with your annual, well, your prostate? When they checked that, there had to have been something that occurred that made them all of a sudden start doing yearly checks. And that's the thing that I'm saying to everybody out there. Get your goddamn chest x-ray. Don't wait. You don't want to be in the boat that I'm in now. So go out and get yourself checked. They say, don't you worry about nothing, Mom. You carry on like you always have, and we're going to get you out of there. We promise you. Just go on about your business. And I did. I did just what they told me to do. And a month later, they sneaked me out of Louisiana under the cover of darkness, and I ain't been back to that hellhole since. Today, my mother lives in Redlands, California, and she has anywhere from 19 to 25 grandkids. I don't know how many. I've lost count. She's got so many. But I think today my mother is somewhat enjoying her life. My father. My father died in 2016. And you know, for years, I didn't know how I felt about my father. And that bothered me. I always thought I had to feel one way or the other. I don't feel that way anymore. You know, if I died tomorrow and still felt this way, I would be okay with that. It wouldn't bother me. You know, I read a quote in a book once that said, never be a prisoner of your past. It was a lesson, not a life sentence. I love that quote.